Ernesto Guevara de la Serna, also known as Che Guevara, was born in Argentina to a middle-class family who was well off. He was a physician that was one of the key members in the Cuban Communist Revolution. After the success of the Cuban Revolution, Che wanted to make a difference in other places of the world, such as Africa and South America. He thought it would be possible to make a revolution occur in these countries, to make them a more pleasant place to live for all their people. Che was murdered by the Bolivian army for attempting to start a revolution there in 1967. Some view Che as a hero and a symbol of rebellion and freedom, while others see him as a villainous killer. Che was never a poor man, as he was born into a well-respected upper-middle-class family in Rosario, Argentina. He had serious problems with asthma as a kid that played a big factor in his later life. He moved around a lot as a child, never really having a place to call home. In 1947, Che moved to Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires, because he had to take care of his old and sick grandmother. When she passed away, Che immediately enrolled in a medical school because he felt helpless when his grandmother passed away and wanted to do something that might make a change towards this cause. He also thought he could help himself with his asthma problem. Che spent his whole life trying to keep his asthma under control by doing exercises and different types of medicine for it, because the asthma was certainly holding him back. One of the most significant events of Che's life was when he took a trip across South America with his friend. This is now known as the Motorcycle Diaries. This event made him realize he wanted to change the world. In 1951, Che took a break from his medical studies to take a trip across South America on a motorcycle with his buddy, Alberto Granado. While on this trip, Che saw the hardships and poverty people were experiencing, and although he didn't know exactly what steps he needed to take to make a change, he knew that he needed and or wanted to help make a difference. When Che reached Santiago, his Norton motorcycle broke down and he had to continue his trip on foot. On his walk, he got hit with another asthma attack, but had to keep walking another 7 kilometers to the next big town where a hospital was located. The two of them took a break at this hospital, but still continued their trip after they were well rested. This goes without showing that Che was a determined man that kept on striving towards his goals with no thought of quitting. After leaving the hospital, they made their way from Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela. Che and Alberto made it through all these countries by foot and hitchhiking. Once they got to Venezuela, Che and his friend went their separate ways. Che went to Miami, then returned to Argentina shortly after. He went back to medical school in 1953, but he just couldn't get his mind off all the suffering people he had seen. Their cries and sad glares kept him from sleeping at night. He knew he couldn't just stay in school, so he started helping put a stop to the inhumane ways people were living in certain areas of the world. Che then set off to Guatemala to begin trying to achieve his new goal. Once he arrived, the president of Guatemala, Jacob Arbenz, was overthrown by the CIA. Che quickly jumped at the opportunity and joined a small army to fight this, but it was over very quickly, which gave Che no time. He then rushed to an Argentinian embassy until he found a way to get to Mexico risk-free. When Che got to Mexico, another significant event happened to him. He met the leader of the assault on the Moncada barracks in Cuba. The assault on the Moncada barracks was the first act of the Cuban Communist Revolution, occurring on July 26, 1953. The reason there was a Cuban Communist Revolution was because the leader at the time, Fulgencio Batista, who was a military officer, forced his way to becoming the dictator of Cuba. The people of his country were not happy at all with the way he was running things, as taxes were high and poverty was higher than ever. Batista's ruthless soldiers beat villagers and citizens who couldn't pay their taxes and raped their wives and daughters. This is why Fidel Castro had created his own army and set his mind to overthrowing the greedy, ruthless Batista.
As mentioned before, the assault on the Moncada barracks was the first attack against Batista's government, and it was successful as Fidel Castro's army caught Batista's troops by surprise and won the battle. In Mexico, Che met the attack leader, Raul Castro, who introduced him to his brother Fidel because of Che's interest to be in a part of the revolution. Fidel was pleased to have a medic and doctor on his side, and because the two had similar views, they became very close friends. In 1956, Che, Fidel, and Raul, along with 80 others, made their way to Cuba on boat and made their way into the Cuban mountains to set up for the long-lasting war between the revolutionaries and the Cuban government. Fidel's goal was to make Cuba a communism, so everyone would be equal instead of the government and higher-class people being rich, while the rest of the country was struggling with poverty, as it was with Batista in power. Once set up in the mountains, losing 20 men on the way there, they set up a way to create propaganda and advertise for people to join the revolution. Once they built up a strong army in the mountains, the irritated Batista finally began to see them as a threat. In the summer of 1958, in an attempt to wipe out any chance of the revolution, Batista sent large armies to the mountains to slaughter all the revolutionists. This was a huge mistake on Batista's part, because even though the revolutionaries were outnumbered, they knew the mountains inside out and were able to dominate and crush Batista's chance for victory. Many of Batista's soldiers were killed. Those that weren't were either held as prisoner or even converted sides. Che and Fidel were extremely happy about this victory, and even though Che struggled to keep up with the rest of the soldiers because of his constant asthma attacks, Fidel promoted him to commander. Now, as Fidel's right-hand man, Che led one of the 3 legions of troops to Cuba's capital, Santa Clara, to wipe out Batista once and for all. Che and his army arrived on December 28, 1958, and the battle was soon to begin. The revolutionaries were the underdogs in this battle, as Che's legion had only 300 men, while there were 2,500 federal troops guarding the city. The people within the city supported the rebels. Even the police were on their side. The people were rioting throughout the city, while the communists and the federal soldiers clashed in the largest battle of the whole war that ended on December 31st, with the communist revolutionaries prevailing victorious. On New Year's of 1959, Batista saw no way to win this war and stepped down as leader of Cuba and evacuated the country immediately. The only reason some would believe Che was a villain was because of his harsh actions against Batista's soldiers and anyone who had supported Batista. He would order most of them to execution, which caused outrage among some people in Cuba. After working in Cuba as a government official until 1965, he knew this was not for him, and he decided to keep spreading the communism around the world. Che spent 5 months in Congo trying to do the same thing he did in Cuba, but was unsuccessful and called it the biggest failure of his life. Upon his return to Cuba, Che still did not give up. He wanted to start a communist revolution in Argentina, but Fidel and other officials convinced him that there was a higher chance of success in Bolivia. Che arrived in Bolivia in 1966 with around 50 rebel soldiers, and they were supposed to receive aid from communist parties in Bolivia, but they had betrayed Che and backed out from helping him. The CIA was in Bolivia at the time, training Bolivian soldiers, and once they found out Che had arrived, they were watching his every move. Che had some early victories in mid-1967, but by the end he was low on food and resources as well as men. There were only 20 soldiers with low morale on Che's side, and with a $4,000 bounty on his head, it was only a matter of time before it was over for him. On October 7th, Che was shot in the leg while resting in the local village. He was on the run for a day before finally getting captured. On October 8th, Che was captured and then executed on October 9th by Sergeant Mario Terán of the Bolivian Army. Che's legacy still lives on to this day, as his face is seen on posters and t-shirts everywhere across the world. He never gave up on his beliefs, no matter what the obstacles were, either being asthma or massive amounts of soldiers. Some would say he's a villain for all the executions he ordered on Batista's allies and troops, but most consider him a hero for promoting equality in Cuba and across the world. Che was a determined man who would not stop working at his goals until they were achieved, or he was dead. In the end, unfortunately, it was death that had stopped him from succeeding in spreading communism and achieving his goals.